When we think about the one another community being different from all other communities, there's really three disciplines or practices that they do regularly that make them that way. One is they teach and admonish one another. We talked about that last week. The second is where there is good teaching and admonishment, there is generally good confession and forgiveness. We'll talk about that in a moment. And finally, because all sins that we forgive don't quickly go away, they have a residual effect. The community that was once offended actually comes alongside the person who offended them, and they help them carry the weight or the effect of that sin. So let's think for a moment about what it would be like to be a forgiving and a confessing community. Confession and forgiveness work with each other like the two axes I have here, one horizontal, the other vertical. Most people confess only what they think another person will forgive. What they don't think they will forgive, they typically won't confess. And most communities only forgive what someone has confessed. So once we think of it as an intersecting discipline, confession and forgiveness kind of intersecting one another, it creates different quadrants. And today we talked ourselves through those. In the upper left, the confession is passive and the forgiveness is passive. And so nobody confesses because they don't think people will forgive, and people don't forgive because nobody confesses. All they have are serial apologies. One apology for every transgression, but only for that transgression, not for anything more, and typically not for anything deeper. No one's really drilling into the cause or why a person did this. They just quickly say, "I'm sorry, please forgive me," and everybody says, "Sure," and we move on. So we become skeptical and detached inside of our communities. Right across from that is a legalistic or a strict group. This is a group where the standards are high, the truth is clear, the rules are clear, the people are kind of demanding, and whenever somebody breaks a rule or they sin in this community, they don't really get involved in the person's recovery. They just hold the standard. They become kind of the priest to whom every sinner must present themselves. As a result, the people don't confess publicly. They confess only to God. They take it up with God because they believe that God's standards are here, but their group's standards are way up here. So they'll take their chances with God. Down in the lower left is a society in which the confessor is passive, but the community is aggressive. They give forgiveness before they should. The confessor has not really committed to do anything new. They've just said, "I'm sorry." And immediately the community comes down and says, "Well, you're completely forgiven. You can have all your rights and privileges back again," with no plan to go forward. And so they become permissive, they enable, they cannot transform, they can only absorb the sins from the other person. Most communities settle for a sterile culture in which we confess and we forgive only surface things, but we don't really go into the middle. We break our sins up into crimes and misdemeanors, and we confess the misdemeanors, but we don't confess the real crimes. We still go home with our secrets because we don't think the community will forgive us. What we were working toward is a restorative community. In a restorative community, the confessor is deeply sorrow for their sins and deeply committed to do something new that they haven't done before to hold themselves accountable. High levels of self-awareness, high levels of self-management. And the community has released them from their sins and said, "You don't owe us anything." And they're also empowering the person to live a new life and have a new practice. When the confessor is aggressive and the community is aggressive, when both of them are bold, then the community becomes restorative. People sin and they are restored and they come back together more tightly than before. The story of the prodigal son, of the father waiting for the son to return and the son running down the path, hoping that his father will forgive him, is the image I want to leave in your mind. Whether you're the person who needs to confess or whether you're the community who needs to forgive, why don't you be the one who runs first?